And one of the reasons that certain people do not have closure is breadcrumbing. So let's say we're specifically talking about a relationship here. You have someone who has left your life, but then they'll randomly call you or text you, and they leave you a little breadcrumb. And you're like, oh, I can't move on because they're going to call me. I did this for 9 months. This is why I was breadcrumbed and led on. That's another word. I was led on for 9 months. If I'd get a little text, little call, little, hey, how you doing? And I'd be like, oh my God, he loves me again. And I did that for 9 months, and I stayed in turmoil over that. And I think of even relationships with family members or friends even that we don't talk for a really long time because this happened or this happened. And then I just get a little taste or an invite. And then I'm like, okay, are we good? Are we good? And then a lot of times it's kind of like a slap in the face of no. And so that's breadcrumbing. And a lot of people hold on because they're starving for this person's attention.
Yes.
They're starving, or they have connected themselves with this person so hard that they're starving for. They will take I'm bringing it back. They will take the plate of shit with whipped cream on top because, oh, it's attention. They gave me something. Oh my gosh. Even if it's tiny little breadcrumbs, they accept that, but they don't realize they are spending emotional time on these people. They're spending all of their emotional time stuck there and they don't have closure. And I feel bad for them. I've been there. But this is where, like we point out a lot, self-awareness really comes into play.
I tried for years with the breadcrumbs with my dad. Like literally, I went out of my way to pretend like what happened when I was a teenager didn't happen because it was never talked about. I went out of my way to talk about I love you and I'm going to be there. I went out of my way to treat him kindly, even though in my heart of hearts, it was just a sacrifice to do that. I went out of my way and showed this man grace that he didn't deserve. And at the end of the day, I start talking about childhood trauma and he loses his shit to my mom. And that's how he reacts to all the things. But it's like at that point, the breadcrumbs, okay, there's no more breadcrumbs. It's like you have chosen to make that bread stale because I'm not eating it anymore. It's not worth it anymore. And to this day, I love it if he came back in my life, but I'm not going to put up with breadcrumbs. You're going to have to give me a whole loaf. It's a bad thing for a keto guy to say out loud, but you have to give me a whole loaf of bread that's freshly made, handmade, best quality ingredients and say, here you go. Here's the closure you wanted.
Oh, I am smiling as I'm writing this down because people just might as well just crown me the boundaries queen at this point because what you said was so important. All right. So when it comes to closure, you're seeking this closure. I feel like if you took a step back and you were the boundary king or the boundary queen and you did not accept the breadcrumbs from people that people give you your whole life, these little tiny little snippets of things that makes you hold on. Set the freaking boundaries. You give me what I am worth, or this is closure. I go back to that. Disinterest is closure. So these tiny little things, this little tiny little bit of love, this little tiny little bit of calls, no, that is still disinterest. That is just keeping you and dragging you along, just watching you follow along behind them like a little mouse just eating the little breadcrumbs. Absolutely not. Set a boundary and say, I will not let you treat me this way. And I have a relationship in my life where I grappled for a really long time of making this decision. But I knew what I wanted, and I set a very strict and strong boundary with this person. And I said, if you can't meet me here, then we do not have a relationship. And that was my closure of whatever the answer was. If you're willing to meet me here, cool, we're going to have a really great relationship. And I offered them the choice to give me boundaries too. I honored their boundaries. And if they couldn't meet me there, then that was the closure that I needed. Boundaries are a big secret in closure.
With that particular example, can I tell you one thing you did that people need to take home is if you're looking for closure, you got to take a chance that you might lose a relationship, a job, a whatever the circumstance is. I'm trying to make it broad for people, but it happens a lot in relationships, and yours happens to be a relationship. But you took that chance, Brittany. This person could have said, yeah, go F yourself, and that would have been your answer, and this person would be out of your life. But they actually surprised you, still surprising you to this day by saying, okay, I see your boundary. And I think they have a newfound respect for you that was not there before. So the boundary that you created actually turned into the closure you've been wanting. And it's not just closure, it's continuation. It's closure of the rift that you had with this person, but it's continuation of this relationship that you always wanted to. So in a sense, the closure became the matriculation of exactly what you've been looking for your whole life.
Boundaries turned into the closure of the pain and a continuation of the new, like setting that boundary. And I think that's why I didn't even realize you were going here. But yeah, if you think about it, you know, someone's hurt you, but you want them in your life and they want to be in your life. That's also the trick. Both of you want to be in each other's lives, but there's too much hurt and pain and you don't know how to do that. Have a real freaking face-to-face adult. I can't even say adult. Mature is the word I'm looking for. Some adults out there, just okay. But have a mature conversation with the other person and say, this is how you hurt me. Give them the opportunity to say, this is how you hurt me. Okay. Apologize. See if there's ways that you can meet in the middle. Set the very strong boundaries of, this is what I want from this relationship. Why are people afraid to do this? Like, this is what I want from this relationship. I do not understand why this is a thing.
Pride. I can tell you right now, with my dad, it's totally pride. He will not allow himself to be wrong about anything. He's narcissistic, like we've talked about. And, you know, when you have that kind of intense pride, which again is a coping mechanism from his trauma, like I know what it is. And this is what makes closure so hard. You can see all the pieces to the puzzle. You know why he's the way he is. You know why he's reticent to want to have these adult conversations, these mature conversations, like you're saying. And so knowing that ahead of time, you don't even want to broach it with them. And then if you do try to broach it with them, then you're mocked, and then it just makes it worse. And so closure just doesn't seem, at least in the traditional sense, like it will ever happen. And that's where I'm at with my dad, that I know I'm not going to get it. And I would love, just on a whim, to try to call him, to maybe go see him in person and try one more time, because I never wanted to give up on the relationship. I feel like the indifference, like you said, was my answer, and that I wasn't going to get it. And it's been hard. You know, it's not been hard to let it go, because I have created that closure in my mind about that relationship. But I hate it for him, because he's not going to get to talk to his oldest son for the rest of his life. And he's done this before. This is the thing. My older brother, Kevin, who died 13 years ago, him and my dad didn't talk for 10 years. So this is a pattern that my dad does, where he'll go quiet on family because he's stubborn, because he's hurt. His trauma doesn't allow him to swallow his pride and try to do the right thing and create closure where closure needs to happen. Now, thankfully, it happened with Kevin, because 1 year after they finally reconciled, I helped bring them back together. 1 year after, Kevin had his heart attacks, and 8 years later, he was dead. So closure means something, because look, once somebody's dead, the only closure you can do is with yourself.
Yeah, I think about two stories that come to mind. So mine is, I was extremely close with my grandmother in my younger years. And after my grandfather passed, my grandmother obviously changed. And she wasn't the same person, because she was hurting and going through her own thing. And I didn't understand then what I know now about grief and about pain and about hurt. And so we drifted apart. And I got really, really hurt by some actions that took place. And my grandmother no longer here anymore. She's no longer here, and I don't get to have that conversation with her. I don't get to have that closure with her, and that's really hard. And I think that was one of the reasons why I didn't really have a whole lot unsaid when it came to Mr. Chris. The past couple of months when I lost Mr. Chris, um, I didn't leave anything unsaid with him. But because of what happened with my grandmother, I make sure that I say what I need to, um, except for that one little relationship thing that happened recently. But finally, that resolved itself months later. It resolved itself. And then I also think about Wild Man, and I'm very careful in how I tell his stories because they're his stories to tell. So I won't go into the big details, but the small details are his dad, his biological father, chose to not be in his life, chose alcohol over him. And because of that, Wildman had to get closure in his mind. And it took him many, many, many years to find any level of not anger, not being upset, but just having closure of this is what's happened and I have to accept this and move on with my life. And he finally got to that point, and his biological father had ran into him when he was 23. And Chris did what we talked about earlier, and it's such a sad story. It's hard to tell. I was with Chris when it happened. He was like 24, 25, somewhere in the young 20s. And he ran into his biological father and opened the door. He said, "You can come back into my life. Here's my number. Call me." He opened the door to have a relationship, to move on, and he never got a call until his father was dying. And that's when he reached out again. And at that point, Chris already had the closure that he needed. And
Yes.
so, his dad didn't get that option because
Yes.
of the years and years. Chris finally said with himself, I have the closure I need. I'm sorry you don't have the closure you need, but
Yeah.
I can't give you what you're looking
And look, the lack of closure sometimes comes down to assumptions.
for. Yeah.
And I caution people, if you're assuming things about other people that you're needing closure from, don't. Instead of assuming, seek out truth, seek out what actually is. Because sometimes our assumptions will fool our brains into thinking one thing, and so therefore we make a rash decision about what closure should be when the evidence shows something totally different. That's why I have trouble totally letting go of my dad's situation, because I know there's a there, there's more there, and he's got to have a willingness, just like you said earlier, to want to have this as much as I do. And so I just hate so many assumptions get in the way of people finding that ultimate closure they're looking for.
Real Good Foods is one of the fastest growing frozen food companies in the U.S. Everything they make is nutrient dense, high in protein, low in carbs, and made from real food ingredients. They make food for every occasion: breakfast sandwiches, poppers, enchiladas, entrees, and pizza. So whether you're on a keto diet, trying to cut back on your carbs, or just trying to eat healthier, they make super convenient and tasty options. RealGoodFoods.com and at Real Good Foods on social media.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I think a lot of our show here is telling our real life experiences so that it helps other people. And I had a friendship that this person assumed a lot of things when I was in a really, really bad mind place. They assumed that I was angry with them. They assumed that I didn't like them. They
Yeah.
assumed all of these things about me, which was never true. They assumed that I told Wildman that to be angry with them, and I'm like, I'm not that person. Like, I'm sorry if that's what came across, but yeah, you're really right. A lot of times when it comes to these relationship problems that happen, there's a lot of assumptions that go on, and maybe closure isn't even the answer. Maybe it's just truth. Maybe you both just need to get some truth out on the table. And so, you know, ended up having to walk away from this friendship. And like I said, it's been really tough to know that I lost a friend through depression and through what was happening, through misunderstanding. But hey, at the end of the day, if this is what it is, this is what it is. And this has to be my closure, that, maybe one day things will be resolved. But for right now, I'm comfortable and confident in knowing that I made the right decision in my
Yeah.
choice.
And not taking on that onus for why something didn't end well and why you now need closure